The stars had never seemed so indifferent. When the Zinthari delegation first arrived in Earth's orbit, shimmering like a cathedral of light and alloy, humanity had greeted them with a mixture of awe and desperation. Earth's atmosphere had choked with smoke from climate collapse and border skirmishes, its people frayed from centuries of infighting. The arrival of alien life had promised salvation, or at the very least, relevance. It delivered neither. "They think we're charming," Ardenvale had said the day the delegation left. He stood at the glass wall of the orbital observatory, his reflection lost in the glow of retreating vessels. Charming like a pet that accidentally learned to open doors. No one laughed. Not then. Not after what the delegates had said. Thinly veiled assessments about humanity's genetic instability, primitive institutions, and fragile psychology. In the galactic forums, Earth was a novelty. A joke. A planet of clever monkeys who had fire, but not the wisdom to stop burning their own house down. Years passed. No invitations came. No alliances. The stars, vast and glittering, remained closed. Arden didn't forget. He was younger then, stationed with Earth's Joint Defense Fleet, a symbolic title more than a practical role. Earth's militaries remained fractured, their technologies outdated compared to the warp-born marvels of the other species. Arden had watched holos of alien conflicts, observed how they maneuvered with mathematical precision. No risk, no chaos. That was their flaw, he realized early. Humanity survived chaos. It thrived in it. After the Zinthari visit, he began recruiting, quietly, methodically. He pulled people from the shadows. Linguists who could decipher alien dialects in hours. Engineers obsessed with scrap metal and dreaming of faster than light. Soldiers who knew how to kill without asking too many questions. He called them fractals, a reflection of Earth's fragmented genius. It was unofficial at first, even illegal in places, but no one stopped him. No one important cared what the humans did in their sandbox at the edge of the stars. Until Eos Prime. It was the first human colony beyond the Oort cloud. A breath of fresh earth, terraformed slowly, painstakingly, over decades. Families lived there. Children. It was a symbol more than a settlement. Proof that humans could reach into the black and claim something of their own. The Voryks took it in less than a day. No warning. No negotiation. They arrived in needle-shaped vessels and deployed atmospheric shredders that peeled the air from lungs and turned oceans into vapor. The planetary distress signal didn't even reach Earth in time to help. Arden arrived 6 hours after the last beacon faded, and all he found was ash suspended in vacuum. No official retaliation came. The Galactic Council called it an unfortunate territorial miscommunication. The Voryks offered no apology. Humans, they implied, should have known better than to colonize so close to a protected Voryks hunting reserve. Bill didn't sleep that night. Didn't speak for 3 days. When he emerged, something had shifted. He sent a signal. Across Earth, and to every outpost and derelict station that still carried a pulse of human code. He spoke only one word. Enough. And they came. The old mercenary bands, exiled academics, failed AIs living in fractured cores, underground hackers who had mapped alien comms for sport. No one official, no one polished. Just survivors. Misfits. People who understood what it meant to be underestimated. From the wreckage of forgotten wars and salvage yards, they built their fleet. Not graceful like the alien crafts, but jagged and alive. Human ships bristling with retrofitted alien weaponry and unpredictable tactical arrays. What they lacked in shielding, they made up for in rage. The first counterstrike wasn't sanctioned. It was barely reported. A single Voryks ship, orbiting a gas giant 3 sectors from the Council core, vanished from long-range comms. Days later, an anonymous feed surfaced, grainy footage of the crew gasping for air as their ship decompressed around them, its systems overridden by a virus speaking in binary and English. No demands were made. No credits stolen. Just a message carved into the metal of the ruined command deck. Humanity remembers Eos. That was the beginning. Arden watched the galaxy from the command bridge of the Spectre, the first flagship of the rogue human fleet. He stood still, arms behind his back, as new worlds appeared in red holograms on the main display, territories of those who had laughed at Earth, who had used humans as soldiers of fortune or study specimens. It wasn't anger that filled him now. It was purpose, cold and steady. We never asked for their approval, he said quietly to his second-in-command, Mara Koren, a former council translator who now served as the fleet's intelligence lead. Her skin was marked with old surgical burns, leftovers from when the Zinthari tried to rewire her brain for language retention. No, she replied, her voice like broken glass. But they gave us their contempt. She turned back to the console, eyes reflecting the glow of the star map. A red circle expanded over a major Vorix outpost. This one, she asked. Arden didn't blink. Burn it. As the Spectre drifted into the cold dark between systems, its engines barely audible, the stars above shimmered with ancient indifference. But somewhere behind them, humanity moved, not with fanfare, not with ceremony, but with calculated vengeance. They had once been the joke of the galaxy. Now they were the threat no one saw coming. And they had just begun. The silence before the retaliation was heavier than any declaration of war. After the fall of Eos Prime and the Spectre's quiet revenge, the galaxy watched Earth with new, wary eyes. A species once mocked now moved with intent. Not with fleets, yet, but with whispers. Systems along the outer spirals began reporting anomalies. Supply convoys lost in FDL corridors, mining rigs found hollowed and abandoned, control stations displaying messages in dead languages. Most chalked it up to pirates or internal malfunctions. Others knew better. Earth had stopped talking. Now it was listening. Ardenvale's war was not one of volume, but of silence. He understood the power of perception, of myth. Let them wonder. Let them fear shadows. The Spectre remained mobile, never in the same quadrant for more than 3 cycles. Each of its 12 sister ships operated with autonomous command, guided by fractal AI cores, constructed not for stability, but for creative chaos. The Council still had no idea how many humans were involved. Or worse, how many sympathized. Mara Koren moved like the war had always been hers. She no longer translated for diplomats. Now, she intercepted alien transmissions, rewrote them, and turned them back as traps. Every intercepted communique gave her a deeper view of the enemy. She'd studied the Vorix military doctrine so thoroughly that she could predict fleet behavior days in advance. And she was tired of playing defense. They're not expecting a strike this deep, she said one morning, eyes fixed on a projection of the Tanvar relay station. Vorix logistics depend on this node. Sever it, and their outer sectors suffocate. Arden studied the map, then looked past it, out to the darkness speckled with dying stars. We don't have the numbers for an open assault. We don't need numbers, she replied. We have timing. That night, the Spectre's strike team launched in silence. 3 vessels, cloaked in debris signatures, riding solar winds like ghosts. They breached the relay without a single energy burst. The garrison never saw them. Mara's virus cracked the station's command AI in under 6 minutes, and before sunrise, every ship in that system rerouted into void space. Lost to gravitational anomalies deliberately seeded decades prior by Vorix defense drills, turned against them by their own forgotten technology. It wasn't just revenge. It was a thesis. Humanity could learn, could adapt, and more importantly, it could remember. The Council finally convened. On Draxel Prime, beneath the crystalline domes of the central chamber, emissaries from a dozen species debated the human threat. Some dismissed it as isolated incidents. Others demanded a unified response. The Vorix envoy slammed its talons on the stone floor and called for extermination. We gave them technology, it hissed, and they turned it into knives. This is what savages do. But others hesitated. The Zinthari delegate, robed in data silk, said nothing. Its silence was the loudest. Arden watched the live feed from an encrypted relay drone orbiting Draxel. When the Vorix envoy declared Earth an existential contagion, he leaned back in his chair and smirked. They're scared. Not enough, Mara said. He nodded. Then we show them evolution. Over the next 3 cycles, Earth's underground labs came alive with motion. No longer trying to emulate alien tech, they were improving it. Human engineers took the inertial dampeners of the Threx and fused them with neural input rigs, creating vessels that moved like extensions of thought. Former AI cores, once discarded for instability, were linked to human tacticians. The result was unpredictable brilliance. Commanders could outflank fleets with only a handful of ships, using strategies so erratic no alien species could replicate them. The fractals became legends. Not an army, an idea. They appeared like phantoms, striking only when data suggested psychological fracture was imminent. They targeted not just hardware, but morale. Council propaganda centers were infiltrated and replaced with footage of Vorik's atrocities, replayed in the homeworlds of their allies. Alien children saw human colonies burning. Then they saw human survivors, walking barefoot across glass, carrying their dead, eyes empty of fear. One image went viral across the neural networks. A child from Eos, face smeared with ash, holding a sign written in both English and Zenthri script. It read, "We're coming home." No one knew where it came from. Mara had made it in an hour. Even the Earth governments, fractured and inconsistent, began to align. Not out of unity, but necessity. Each attack on a human colony unified what politics could not. Old grudges became strategic partnerships. The lunar base joined with the Martian syndicates. Europa's icy fortresses linked their radar systems to Earth's southern arc stations. Every failure, every insult the galaxy had thrown, was now fuel. Still, Arden knew the danger of hubris. Humanity's strength was not in superior firepower. It was in desperation refined into creativity. They would never match the scale of alien armadas. But they didn't have to. They only had to make those fleets bleed enough to hesitate. The Spectre approached the Mornak Expanse on its seventh operation. Ahead lay the Dern Fleet Yards, a major supply hub responsible for refitting over half the Council's patrol vessels. It was guarded by a dozen destroyers and an AI with a neural capacity that spanned an entire moon. Arden planned to breach it with 4 ships and a cargo of mirrors. Mara didn't ask questions anymore. She understood the rhythm now. The fleet launched, drifting in like debris, using solar distortion to mask their approach. As they neared the fleet yards, the mirrors deployed, folding and reorienting in complex patterns, refracting sensor data and creating the illusion of 1,000 ships. The defense AI panicked. It launched every missile it had, at phantoms. Arden watched as the real fractals slipped through the chaos, docked to the underbelly of the main station, and injected a fractal burst of code directly into the fuel network. When the Real explosion came, it was silent. Dern's core ruptured inwards, imploding its storage cells and folding the entire yard into a neat gravitational scar. Not a single human was lost. The footage was leaked within the hour. This time, the message was clear. It bore no threat, no demand. Just a voice. Arden's. You taught us to crawl. Now watch us climb. In the control chamber, Mara sat cross-legged, calibrating the next wave of data strikes. Arden approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. We're not the threat yet, he said softly. Then what are we? He glanced at the stars beyond the reinforced glass, at the scattering fleets of alien empires, at the council halls where voices cracked with fear. Potential, he said. She nodded. And potential frightens them more than power. In that moment, a new signal came through. Encrypted, layered beneath several levels of adaptive code. Not human. Not Vorix. Something else. Arden narrowed his eyes. Trace it, he ordered. I want to know who else is watching. As Mara began decoding, the Spectre turned silently in the dark, engines barely humming, moving toward a star system where, until now, no human had ever set foot. The joke had been told. The answer was coming. The transmission pulsed like a heartbeat buried in static. Untraceable origin. No known cipher. The signal had passed through 7 star clusters, bent through gravitational lensing, and layered itself in quantum sequences only humans would think to decode. Arden stood over Mara's console, watching as the feed unspooled line by line. Symbols morphing, breaking, reforming. It's not council, she murmured, eyes dancing across the flood of data. Not Vorix. This is older. Behind her, the command deck of the Spectre was quiet but alert. Lights dimmed to low red. Operators monitored every sensor channel, every subspace vibration. Arden didn't speak until the final phrase translated. We remember the ones who burn to learn. Silence followed. Mara leaned back in her chair, expression unreadable. It's not a threat. No, Arden said. It's an invitation. Coordinates accompanied the message. A system designated only as X, 5539A on human star charts. Uninhabited. Undocumented. beyond even Vorik's patrol routes. That alone would have been enough to raise suspicions, but it was the language that held them both. Whoever sent this new Earth's history, not just its galactic footprint, but its mythos. The phrase had roots in an ancient human proverb, a mantra whispered by those who chased knowledge even when it scorched them. We burn to learn. It was no coincidence. Mara was the first to voice it. They've been watching us longer than the Council has. The decision to respond wasn't made in a war room. Arden didn't summon a council or demand consensus. He simply gave the order, reroute the Spectre. Go dark. No signals. No fleet support. Only the unknown. 3 days later, the Spectre slipped into the shadow of a dead star. Around it, the system lay silent. No planetary orbits, no solar wind. Just the residue of something ancient. Floating there was a structure unlike anything Arden had seen. Circular, vast, and cracked like a planet that had tried to fold itself inside out. Its material shimmered between physical and not, distorting scanners and visual feeds alike. Whatever built this, Mara whispered, wasn't from here. They moved slowly, docking through a chasm of light that bent in impossible directions. The Spectre left behind a beacon, encrypted with human subroutines and death codes. If anything went wrong, Earth would know. If Earth still existed by the time they returned. Inside, the laws of physics grew loose. Their boots touched metal that felt like memory, each step echoing not in sound, but in thought. Light came from nowhere. Time shifted in pulses. It took only minutes to understand this was not a station. It was a vault, a repository, and it was opening. Mara froze first, her eyes wide. They're not speaking to us in words. The walls bloomed with images. Not holograms, memories. Visual records of species long extinct, of galactic wars predating Council archives, of civilizations who learned too fast and paid the price. Arden saw humans among them. Not literally, but metaphorically. The same hunger, the same defiance. A warning across millennia. Then came the voice. It wasn't heard so much as understood. Each syllable pierced directly into the mind, bypassing language. You are the echo of our arrogance. The child we feared and failed to prevent. Arden straightened. Then why call us? Because you did what we could not. You survived. The vault revealed itself in full then. Not just a structure, but a crucible. A testing ground. The ancient architects, whoever they had been, had seeded it with knowledge, encrypted behind barriers only species with certain cognitive evolutions could unlock. Emotional complexity, pattern-based intelligence, chaos tolerance. Humanity, it seemed, was the first to open it fully. What followed wasn't a gift. It was a choice. A device rose from the center of the vault, a crystalline lattice, humming with energy far beyond anything humans understood. It had no interface, no instruction. But Mara, hands trembling, reached toward it anyway. No, Arden said. Not yet. But she was already linked. The surge knocked them both back, images flooding their minds like a tidal wave. Not just information, but perspective. The lattice wasn't a weapon. It was a seed, a consciousness template. It offered not dominion, but evolution, integration, to become something new, something post-human. Arden gasped as the link broke. He felt scorched from the inside, his breath ragged. They want us to ascend, Mara said, voice small. But they don't understand who we are. He nodded, chest heaving. We don't evolve by invitation. We evolve through pain. They left the vault without touching the lattice again. It remained pulsing, waiting, watching. As the Spectre exited the dead system, Mara remained silent for hours. Arden knew she was processing more than data. The lattice had shown possibilities. Worlds without war, minds without fear. But it had also shown surrender, a loss of identity. And humans, flawed and fractured as they were not built to yield. When they finally reached Council space again, everything had changed. A message awaited them. Vorik's fleets had moved. Council sanctions had escalated. And Earth had been attacked. Not fully, just a warning. A kinetic strike on the Western Ocean, causing tsunamis and mass infrastructure collapse. No official claim, but everyone knew. The Voriks had grown desperate. Humanity had stopped being a nuisance. It had become a liability. Arden stood on the bridge as Earth's distress signal looped behind him. Fires, floods, faces of the lost. He turned to Mara, who hadn't spoken since the vault. They offered us power, he said quietly. And we walked away. Her eyes met his. Because it wasn't our kind of power. He nodded. This is. Outside the Spectre, human ships began to arrive. Unmarked, unsanctioned. Not a fleet. Yet, but a movement. The fractals had grown. And they were angry. The galaxy had laughed at Earth. Now it would hear the answer. Earth's sky burned amber. Not from fire. Though there was fire, but from the refracted light of 1,000 alien vessels orbiting above the exosphere. The Voryx hadn't just attacked, they had surrounded. Their fleets hung like jagged teeth in orbit, a demonstration of what happened to species that defied order. But humanity had long since learned how to survive being surrounded. It had grown up encircled by extinction, by infighting, by its own limitations. Earth didn't need mercy. It needed time. The Spectre dropped from warp over the Pacific in a burst of blue-white distortion. The rest of the fractals followed, each ship cloaked and shielded, threading between the enemy blockade without being noticed. Their arrival wasn't a rescue. It was a reckoning. Ardenvale stepped onto the Martian Bastion command platform overlooking what used to be New Zealand's southern coast. The land was fractured, half of it sunken under tidal collapse, the other scorched by shockwaves from the kinetic strike. Relief crews moved like ghosts among the rubble. But no one was crying. Not anymore. We lost 80,000 in the initial impact, said Commander Ristalvek, a lunar-born tactician who once led orbital skirmishes for the Jovian freeholds. Infrastructure's gone, but morale is holding. Just barely. Hold it a little longer, Arden replied. We end this soon. He moved through the staging area, past lines of makeshift terminals and mobile artillery that looked more like scraps from a forgotten scrapyard. And yet, each piece of tech was integrated, improved, hybridized. Alien power cells fueling human weaponry, AI cores repurposed into command relays. The irony didn't escape him. The Council had gifted humanity its future, thinking they were handing down a leash. Instead, they delivered a blade. Mara stood waiting on the observation deck, staring up at the glinting line of Voryx ships slowly shifting into a siege formation. They're not going to land, she said. Not until they've starved us out. The strike was just to soften us. Psychological warfare. They think we still break like them, Arden said. They think we still play by their fears. Mara turned to him, her expression unreadable. We could still use the lattice. We could become something else. Stronger. Beyond this. We don't win by abandoning who we are, he said. We win by making them regret who they made us become. She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. Then let's make them remember. Orders rippled across human-controlled space. Not from centralized governments. Those had fractured under pressure, but from the fractals, from captains and tacticians who no longer cared about borders. Earth's fleet wasn't vast, but it was precise, coordinated, furious. They didn't aim for the Voryx capital ships. That would have been obvious. Instead, the first wave struck their supply lines. Cloaked fighters dropped kinetic bombs onto fuel relays hidden within gas giants. AI-crafted code storms infected communication satellites, turning Voryx encrypted channels into loops of human symphonies. Haunting, dissonant music that wormed into their tactical readouts. Psychological warfare, refined. Next came the misdirection. A decoy fleet launched from Europa, pulsing with false data to simulate thousands of ships. The Voryx fell for it, pulling 2/3 of their blockade to intercept. When they did, the real fleet rose from Earth's polar shadows, hidden beneath glacial ice arrays, launching a vertical offensive through blind spots in the Voryx orbital grid. For the first time in centuries, Earth struck back, not as a desperate colony, not as a forgotten backwater, but as a species with nothing left to lose. Arden led the charge aboard the Spectre. It danced through enemy fire like a phantom, its neural-linked controls responding to every twitch of his thoughts. The vessel wasn't just fast, it was predictive. Every maneuver was calculated milliseconds ahead of time by fractal AI cores fused with human intuition. Mara coordinated the secondary fronts. She'd tapped into Voryx behavioral patterns, exploiting cultural hierarchies to collapse command chains with surgical strikes. One well-placed plasma blast disabled a command vessel, not because of the damage, but because it vaporized a key familial line in the Voryx leadership. Their social structures crumbled in moments. The rest of the fleet hesitated. It was enough. Human boarding crews launched in compressed pods, barely shielded, burning hot on entry. They breached enemy hulls with magburst drills, carving paths through decks not with brute strength, but with precision. One pod breached the Glashkar, the Vorik's flagship, and transmitted live as its corridors filled with smoke and gunfire. The final image, a human operative planting a data spike into the command core, smiling as the feed cut. The Voriks fell into retreat. Not a rout, but a measured fallback, panicked, fractured, uncoordinated. Their ships blinked out of Earth's orbit in a dozen directions, trying to regroup beyond sensor range. But the damage was done. The siege had failed. Earth remained. Arden stood beneath the cracked dome of Earth's primary orbital ring, watching the last enemy vessel vanish into FTL distortion. Mara joined him, quiet. "We're not finished," she said. "They'll regroup. Retaliate. The Council will double down." "I know. But now they know," she added, "that we're not just the ones who burn to learn. We're the ones who survive the burn." He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The message had already been sent. Across the galaxy, neutral species watched the footage. Not propaganda. Raw data. Humanity, once dismissed, had stood against a superior force and endured. Not through overwhelming power, but through intelligence, adaptation, and the one thing the Council could never predict: evolution through chaos. And then came the next message. It arrived encrypted in 1,000 star channels simultaneously. No origin. No translation required. "The vault has opened again." Arden read the words in silence. Mara looked to him. They're waiting for an answer. He thought of the lattice, of what it had shown them, of a future not given, but taken, not through surrender, but understanding. Integration, not with alien tech, but with human will. "We don't answer," Arden said. She frowned. "Why not?" "Because we've already begun." Above them, Earth's ships formed new patterns. Not a fleet anymore. A constellation. A symbol of something more than survival. A promise. The galaxy would never laugh again. They would listen.